Welcome to the National Schools Literature Festival. I'm Dr. Suzanne Choo, and in this short video, I'll be introducing the unseen debate and telling you how to prepare for it. Let me start by introducing the debate. You will first work in a team of 4 members, and about 2 weeks before the Literature Festival, your team will be given an unseen poem. Now the team's job is to provide the most original and convincing interpretation of the poem. What does this debate test? Well, it tests your ability to critically analyze an unseen poem, to craft a clear and convincing argument, and to question your opponent and respond well to questions on the spot. How can you prepare for this debate? Well, I will be talking about 3 stages. The first, decide on the most original critical lens. Then support this critical lens with evidence from the text. Finally, think of possible questions to counter or rebut your opposing team. Let's start with the critical lens. Now decide on the most original critical lens. Each team will be given only 1 poem, and there will be no questions given. What this means is that it's up to the team to craft the critical lens. The critical lens should begin as follows. Our house believes that the text most effectively, choose one of these words, conveys, describes, depicts. What exactly is a critical lens? A critical lens is a focused, thematic angle through which to interpret the poem. Take this poem as an example, Those Winter Sundays by Robert Hayden. Now you may want to pause the video as you read the poem. Note that the poem your team receives will likely be much longer than this. Now here are some examples of critical lenses. The first, our house believes that the text most effectively describes a father's relationship with his son. Here's another example. Our house believes that the text most effectively depicts the pain of regret of having taken one's parent for granted. Which critical lens is better, the first or the second? The first one says, describes a father's relationship with his son. It's acceptable, but it's a little too obvious and general. Let's look at the second one, depicts the pain of regret of having taken one's parent for granted. Now this second one seems more specific. It also seems to get at the heart of what the author is trying to say. So the second one is stronger. To arrive at a good critical lens, you need to spend time reflecting, analyzing, thinking about the poem. What is the text saying on the surface? What does it seem to be suggesting? Is there an underlying meaning? What is it? What could be the implied author's intention in writing this poem? Is there a philosophical message? Work with your team and brainstorm possible critical lenses to the poem. Then pick the best one. Consider these 3 points. 1. Is your critical lens original? Does it offer a refreshing take on the poem? Is your critical lens specific and focused enough rather than general and vague? Can your critical lens be supported by evidence from the poem? Now avoid saying something that is speculative and cannot be proven. Now there are obviously many different critical lenses to choose from, so spend time as a team to think about this and then find the most exciting and innovative one. Next, support this critical lens with evidence from the text. Remember, your job is to convince the judges of your critical interpretation of the text. Here is a strategy. Divide the critical length into 6 or to 8 subpoints. For each subpoint, find at least 2 evidence from the text to support this. All evidence must be elaborated and must connect to the point that you are trying to make. Let's go back to that poem, Those Winter Sundays. A possible critical lens is: our house believes the text most effectively depicts the pain of regret of having taken one's parent for granted. This is conveyed through the overall mood of nostalgia, reflecting the sense of a past that is lost. Description of the setting indicating the harsh physical environment the father protected his child from, and the speaker's sorrow at the realization of his ignorance at the time. The use of juxtaposition to contrast the father's behavior from that of the child, indicating the speaker's remorse at not having appreciated his father. And you can come up with more points. Try to have at least 6 to 8 subpoints. As far as possible, the subpoints should draw attention to the literary techniques used to convey the critical lens to the reader. Focus on how the author conveys a theme or idea through techniques such as mood, setting, imagery, sound devices, tension, conflict, juxtaposition, repetition, oxymoron, metaphor, simile, personification, antithesis, word order, word choice, form, rhythm, rhyme, and so on. It's very important that you use literary language to talk about the poem. If necessary, refer to a guidebook to help you with your analysis. Now for each subpoint, find at least 2 evidence from the text to support this. The use of juxtaposition to contrast the father's behavior from that of his child, indicating the speaker's remorse at not having appreciated his father. That's a point. But where's the evidence? Let's take a look. Well, here is one evidence. The first line, Sundays too my father got up early, is juxtaposed against the line, slowly I would rise and dress. The function is to contrast the father's own hard-working, committed attitude to provide for his family with his child's more lackadaisical and laid-back manner. The effect of this is to illustrate the speaker's own guilt at recognizing his own indifference to his father's brand of love, a love that is demonstrated not by shallow words, but by everyday acts of concern. Is there other evidence we can find? Here's a second evidence. Once the father had ensured the rooms were sufficiently warm, he would call out to his child. The word call conveys a gentle, inviting sense. This is juxtaposed with the child's cold response in speaking indifferently to his father. The notion of speaking suggests an impersonal, distanced, and even flippant tone. The use of juxtaposition serves to bring across the speaker's haunting regret at not having treated his father with respect. Now I've given you some examples. Here are some points to consider. Your evidence should include quotations from the text. The analysis of evidence should involve discussing the function of the technique or the purpose of the technique and its effect on the reader. In other words, what's the main idea or emotion this conveys? The analysis of the evidence must show how this contributes to the main point or critical lens. Remember, your goal is to convince the judges of your team's critical interpretation. Now, in the event that 2 teams have the same or similar critical lens, the team with the stronger argument will be the team with the most convincing evidence. So, evidence counts. Finally, think of possible questions to counter your opponent. The unseen debate consists of 2 rounds, the opinion round, in which 2 speakers give their points, and the rebuttal round, in which teams alternate to critique the other team's points. In addition to preparing your team's points, you need to think of preparing questions to counter your opponents. Of course, it is not possible to foresee what your opponent's critical lens of points will be, so this requires some degree of speculation. You also need to provide a response when you're questioned by your opponent. In short, this round requires you to think on your feet. Now, let's look at an example. Supposing you are the opposing team and wanted to counter the other team's arguments. The other team made this point: our house believes the text most effectively depicts the pain of regret of having taken one's parent for granted, and provided this evidence. The author employs juxtaposition to contrast the father's behavior from that of his child, indicating the speaker's remorse at not having appreciated his father. Here is an example of a counter question. The team states that the poem depicts the pain of regret, but the evidence that juxtaposition indicates the speaker's remorse doesn't necessarily illustrate pain. Team A has not defined what the pain of regret is, or shown how the author conveys this. Now that I've given you some examples, here are some other points to consider. Good questions are specific and attack the argument. Avoid open-ended why questions, like why did you use this word, or why do you point to juxtaposition as a technique. This is a question about the team's intention. It is not a counter question. Good questions critique opposing teams' logic and point to discrepancies, ambiguities in their arguments. Good questions critique the lack of connection between point and evidence in the opposing team's arguments. Good questions raise generalizations and lack of evidence in the opposing team's arguments. And finally, good questions bring to light contradictions in the opposing team's arguments. Now that I've gone through how to prepare for the debate, I want to talk about the structure of this debate. Your team will consist of 4 members. The first speaker introduces the critical lens, defines the key terms, and states why it is an important theme explored in the text. The second speaker gives the main point and elaborates on the critical lens with supporting evidence from the text. The third speaker concludes by summarizing main points and reiterating the team's stand with justification from the text. You will also have a fourth member who is a research assistant. He or she takes down notes, observes comments from the opposing team, but is not involved in the presentation. He or she is only involved in the think time. The structure of the debate consists of the following rounds. The first is an opinion round. Team A makes the case, beginning with the first speaker followed by the second speaker, each with 3 minutes. Team B then makes the case, beginning with the first speaker, second speaker, each with 3 minutes. This is followed by a 3-minute think time. All members of the group, including the fourth speaker, will now gather together to confer on the kinds of questions to ask the opposing team. Following this is the rebuttal round. Starting with Team A, teams alternate to raise questions to critique the other team's points. The other team must then respond and justify their arguments. Each team is only allowed a maximum of 1 minute to answer. The maximum time for this round is 6 minutes. Finally, the conclusion round. Team B's third speaker begins with 2 minutes to summarize and reiterate the team's stand on the poem. This is followed by Team A's third speaker, who is also given 2 minutes to summarize and reiterate the team's stand on the poem. Now, the team must be familiar with the structure of the debate. Visit the Unseen Debate section of the website at nationalschoolslitfest.wikispaces.com. Be sure to read 2 documents, the PDF document titled Unseen Debate Structure.pdf and Unseen Debate Rubrics.pdf. Finally, as you prepare for this debate, have fun. Enjoy yourselves collaborating, thinking critically, and thinking on your feet. If you have further questions, email to Suzanne Choo at gmail.com.